The knock on my door came at exactly 7 in the morning on a Tuesday, which should have been my first clue that my peaceful life in rural Montana was about to get complicated. I rolled out of bed, pulled on a flannel shirt over my thermal underwear, and shuffled to the front door of my farmhouse. Through the frosted glass, I could see a woman in an unnecessarily pressed blazer holding a clipboard, her breath forming little clouds in the January air. Behind her, a silver Mercedes sat idling in my driveway, exhaust puffing into the cold morning. "Can I help you?" I asked, opening the door just wide enough to be polite but not enough to let all the warm air escape. "Are you Adrian Calloway?" she asked, her voice sharp and efficient. "That's me. I'm Patricia Henderson, president of the Whispering Pines HOA. I'm here to inform you that you're in violation of Section 12, subsection B of our community guidelines regarding external storage and aesthetic maintenance." I blinked at her, still trying to process words through my pre-coffee brain fog. "Madam, I don't live in Whispering Pines. I live on Calloway Farm, which has been in my family since 1947. She thrust a piece of paper at me. "Your property borders our community, and your visible stockpile of firewood is creating an eyesore that negatively impacts our residents' property values. This is your official notice of violation. You have 14 days to remedy the situation or face a fine of $500. I looked down at the paper, then back at her. "You're fining me for wood on my own property. The wood is visible from Evergreen Drive, which runs along your eastern property line. Our covenants clearly state that any visible structures or materials that detract from the community's aesthetic appeal must be addressed, regardless of property ownership." "That's not how property rights work," I said slowly. Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line. "Mr. Calloway, I suggest you read the documentation thoroughly. Our HOA has legal standing in this matter. Good day." She turned on her heel and marched back to her Mercedes, leaving me standing in my doorway, confused and increasingly annoyed. I went back inside, made coffee, and actually read the papers she had given me. It was the most ridiculous thing I had ever seen. The Whispering Pines HOA, which had been built 5 years ago on land adjacent to my family's farm, was claiming that because my firewood storage area was visible from their development, it violated some kind of view ordinance they had convinced the county to pass. The thing was, I didn't just store firewood for myself. I ran a legitimate business selling seasoned firewood to people all over the county. Every fall, I would process timber from my woodlot, split and stack it, and sell it throughout the winter. It was good income, especially since farming had gotten tougher over the years. Half my customers actually lived in Whispering Pines, where people loved the aesthetic of wood-burning fireplaces, but had no idea how to source their own fuel. I called my lawyer, a guy named Mitchell Barnes who had handled my father's estate and various farm legal issues over the years. "Mitch, I need you to look at something," I said when he picked up. "Adrian, it's 7:30 in the morning. Lady from the HOA just showed up at my door threatening to fine me. That got his attention. You don't live in an HOA." That's what I said. I drove into town later that morning and met Mitch at his office. He read through the papers, his frown deepening with each page. "This is creative, I'll give them that," he said finally. "They're using a county ordinance that was supposed to prevent junkyards from operating near residential areas. They're claiming your firewood storage constitutes a commercial stockpile that impacts their quality of life. Can they do that? They can try. Whether it'll hold up is another question. The ordinance has some vague language about unsightly commercial storage, but firewood stacked on a working farm has never been interpreted that way. Problem is, fighting it will cost you money. How much money?" Could be a few thousand, depending on how far they want to push it. I left Mitch's office feeling frustrated. I had never had problems with neighbors before. The old Johnson family had owned the land where Whispering Pines now stood, and they had never cared about my firewood or anything else I did on my property. But they had sold out to a developer, and now I was dealing with people who thought property values were more important than a person's right to run a legitimate business on their own land. Over the next few days, I did what I always did and ignored problems I thought would go away on their own. I kept stacking wood, kept filling orders, and kept delivering to my customers. 3 of them lived in Whispering Pines, and they were some of my best clients. Robert Patterson ordered a cord a month all winter. Sarah Myers liked to keep extra on hand for power outages. And Tom Jenkins had a massive fireplace and burned through wood like it was going out of style. On day 15 after Patricia's visit, another knock came at my door. This time it was a county sheriff's deputy holding a court summons. "Adrian Calloway?" he asked, looking apologetic. "Yeah." "Sorry about this, man. You're being summoned to county court for violation of Ordinance 47B. I took the papers. Thanks, I guess. For what it's worth, I buy firewood from you every year. This is garbage." "Appreciate that," I called Mitch again. He was less surprised this time. "They're serious about this," he said. "We need to respond. I'll file the paperwork, but Adrian, you should think about whether you want to fight this or just move your wood storage." "Move it where?" "It's on my property, in the most convenient location for processing and loading. I've been stacking wood in that same spot for 15 years. "I know. Just wanted to make sure you understood what you're getting into." "File the paperwork." The court date was set for 6 weeks out, which gave me plenty of time to get angrier about the whole situation. What really got under my skin was the principle of it. These people had moved into a rural area next to a working farm and now wanted to dictate how I used my own land. It was the kind of entitled nonsense that made small-town Montana folks' blood boil. I was making a delivery to Tom Jenkins in Whispering Pines when I really started to understand what I was dealing with. I pulled my truck up to his house, a sprawling 2-story with stone veneer, and professionally landscaped everything. Tom came out to help me unload. "Adrian, heads up," he said quietly. "Patricia's been going house to house telling people not to buy from you anymore." "What?" "Yeah, she's saying you're a troublemaker and that supporting your business undermines the HOA's authority. She wants everyone to start buying from that place in Missoula that delivers. That place charges twice what I do. I know. I told her to pound sand, but some people are listening to her. This is insane. Welcome to HOA life, buddy. Why do you think I spend all my time in my backyard away from these people?" I unloaded Tom's cord of wood, stacking it neatly in his designated spot, and thought about what he had said. Patricia wasn't just trying to make me move my wood pile. She was trying to destroy my business because I had dared to push back against her authority. That's when I made my decision. If Patricia wanted to play hardball, I could play too. And I had something she didn't have: leverage. I drove home and pulled up my customer list. Out of my 43 regular winter customers, 18 lived in Whispering Pines. They represented about 40% of my annual firewood income. It would hurt to lose them, but it wouldn't destroy me. The satisfaction of denying Patricia what she wanted might just be worth it. I spent that evening drafting a letter. It was polite but firm. "Dear valued customer, due to ongoing legal action initiated by the Whispering Pines HOA against my business, I will no longer be able to provide firewood delivery services to residents of Whispering Pines, effective immediately. This decision was not made lightly, but I cannot in good conscience continue to serve a community whose leadership is actively working to shut down my family's farm business. All existing orders will be fulfilled. Any deposits for future orders will be refunded in full. I apologize for any inconvenience and wish you well. Sincerely, Adrian Calloway. I printed 18 copies and hand-delivered them the next day, going door to door through Whispering Pines. Most people weren't home, so I left the letters in mailboxes. But I did catch Sarah Myers at home. "Adrian, what's this about?" she asked, reading the letter I had just handed her. "Your HOA president is suing me for storing firewood on my own property. She's also been telling people not to buy from me. I'm done doing business with anyone in this community." Sarah's face fell. "But I've been buying from you for 3 years. I have nothing to do with what Patricia's doing." "I understand that, and I'm sorry, but I can't support a community that's trying to destroy my livelihood. This is ridiculous. Patricia doesn't speak for all of us. Maybe you should tell her that." I left Sarah on her porch and continued my deliveries. By the time I finished, my phone was already ringing. I didn't answer. I had said what I needed to say. The next morning, my voicemail was full. Most of the messages were from Whispering Pines residents begging me to reconsider. A few were angry, calling me petty and unprofessional. One was from Patricia herself. "Mr. Calloway, this vindictive action only proves that you're exactly the kind of person who shouldn't be operating a business near our community. You're proving our point." I deleted it and went out to split more wood. 3 days later, Robert Patterson showed up at my farm. He drove up in a Range Rover and got out wearing what I assumed was his work outfit, expensive casual clothes that had probably never been actually casual a day in their lives. "Adrian, can we talk?" he called out. I set down my splitting maul. "Sure. This thing with the HOA, it's gotten out of hand. I agree. I'm not here on Patricia's behalf. I'm here because you're the best firewood supplier in the county and I don't want to lose access to your product. Should have thought about that before your HOA decided to sue me. I didn't vote for any of this. Most of us didn't even know Patricia was doing it until the letters went out. That's how HOAs work, isn't it? A few people with too much time on their hands make decisions for everyone else." Robert ran his hand through his hair. "Look, I get that you're angry, but punishing all of us for Patricia's actions isn't fair. You know what else isn't fair? Being sued for operating a legal business on my own property. Being told that what I've been stacking in the same spot for 15 years is suddenly a problem because some people who just moved here don't like looking at it. I hear you. What would it take for you to reconsider? Drop the lawsuit. I don't have that authority. Then I guess we don't have anything else to talk about." Robert stood there for a moment, looking like he wanted to say more, but eventually he just nodded and left. The court date arrived in early March. The winter had been brutal, and my firewood sales to non-Whispering Pines customers had actually increased as people burned through their supplies faster than expected. I wasn't hurting financially, which made it easier to stand on principle. Mitch met me at the county courthouse in Helena, about an hour's drive from my farm. The building was old but well-maintained, with high ceilings and wood paneling that probably would have offended Patricia's modern sensibilities. Patricia was there with her own lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman from Missoula named Karen Stevenson, which I found almost too perfect. Of course, Patricia's lawyer was named Karen. Judge William Hendricks presided. He was an older man who had grown up in Montana and, according to Mitch, had very little patience for what he called suburban nonsense. Karen Stevenson presented the HOA's case first. She showed photos of my firewood storage, talked about property values and community standards, and cited the county ordinance about commercial storage near residential areas. "Your Honor, The defendant is operating what amounts to a commercial lumber yard directly adjacent to a residential community. The impact on property values and quality of life for Whispering Pines residents is significant and measurable. Judge Hendricks looked at the photos. "Counselor, that looks like stacked firewood to me." "Stacked in commercial quantities, Your Honor. Mr. Calloway is running a business on his own land that is visible from our client's properties." "Madam, if I find everyone in this county whose property was visible from someone else's property and didn't meet their aesthetic standards, I'd never get through my docket." It was a good sign, but Mitch had warned me not to get cocky. Judges could be unpredictable. Mitch presented our case next. He talked about property rights, the history of my family's farm, and the fact that the ordinance in question had never been applied to agricultural or farm-based businesses before. "Your Honor, Mr. Calloway is a third-generation Montana farmer operating a legitimate business on land his family has owned for nearly 80 years. The Whispering Pines development is less than 5 years old. This is a clear case of newcomers trying to impose their preferences on established rural residents." Judge Hendricks asked me some questions directly. How long had I been selling firewood? Where was I selling it? How was it processed? I answered honestly and simply. I had been selling firewood for 15 years. I sold primarily to local residents within a 30-mile radius. I processed timber from my own woodlot sustainably, following all state forestry guidelines. And before Whispering Pines was built, did anyone ever complain about your firewood storage? The judge asked. "No, sir. The Johnson family owned that land for decades, and we were good neighbors. When did you first hear there was a problem?" "January 19th of this year, when Mrs. Henderson showed up at my door at 7 in the morning with a violation notice." Judge Hendricks wrote something down. "I'm going to take a brief recess to review the ordinance in question." We waited in the hallway. Patricia stood with her lawyer at the opposite end, occasionally glancing our way. I noticed several other people from Whispering Pines had shown up, including Sarah Myers and Tom Jenkins. They gave me supportive nods. After 30 minutes, we were called back in. "I've reviewed the ordinance and the applicable case law," Judge Hendricks said. Ordinance 47B was enacted to prevent junkyards and salvage operations from operating near residential areas without proper permits and screening. The language about unsightly commercial storage has been interpreted in previous cases to refer to vehicles, scrap metal, and similar materials. To my knowledge, it has never been applied to agricultural products or farm operations. Karen Stevenson stood up. "Your Honor, with respect, firewood sold commercially is not an agricultural product in the traditional sense. Counselor, timber is one of Montana's primary agricultural products. Mr. Calloway is processing and selling timber from his own land. That's farming. The fact that it's visible from an adjacent development is not grounds for violation. People who choose to live in rural areas adjacent to working farms need to accept that farms don't always look like the photos in a magazine." Patricia's face was turning red. "The complaint is dismissed," Judge Hendricks continued. "Mr. Calloway is operating a legitimate business on his own property in a manner consistent with rural Montana agricultural practices. The HOA's attempt to expand the scope of County Ordinance 47B to include such operations is overreach. Furthermore, I'm awarding Mr. Calloway costs and reasonable attorney fees. Mrs. Henderson, I strongly suggest that your HOA focus its energy on its own community and stop trying to regulate property it doesn't own." I felt Mitch's hand on my shoulder. We had won. Outside the courthouse, Patricia stormed past without a word. Karen Stevenson looked professionally disappointed but not particularly surprised. Sarah Myers and Tom Jenkins caught up with me in the parking lot. "That was awesome," Tom said. "Did you see Patricia's face?" "Does this mean you'll sell to us again?" Sarah asked hopefully. I hesitated. The truth was I was still angry. Winning in court didn't erase the stress and expense of the last 2 months. "I need to think about it," I said. Tom nodded. "Fair enough. But for what it's worth, there's a lot of us who had nothing to do with this and think Patricia's a nightmare. She's made everyone's life miserable, not just yours." "Why do you let her?" "HOA politics are complicated," Sarah said. "She's president because she's the only one willing to put in the time. Most of us just want to live our lives. Maybe that's the problem." I drove home feeling vindicated but not particularly happy. I had won the battle, but it had still cost me time, money, and energy I would rather have spent on my farm. Over the next few weeks, I got more calls and visits from Whispering Pines residents. The consensus was clear. People wanted me to start selling to them again. Some even offered to pay more to make up for my trouble. I was splitting wood one afternoon when a car I didn't recognize pulled up. A woman got out, mid-40s, wearing jeans and a practical jacket. She walked over with the kind of confidence that suggested she was used to being in charge. "Adrian Calloway," she asked. "That's me." "I'm Teresa Bishop. I live in Whispering Pines." "Okay. I'm here to apologize on behalf of the sane people in our community. What Patricia did was wrong and we're working to fix it." "Working how?" "We're recalling her as HOA president. It takes time and paperwork, but we have the signatures. She'll be out by June." That got my attention. "Really? Really? The lawsuit against you was the last straw for a lot of people." "She's been fining residents for ridiculous things, blocking reasonable requests, and generally making everyone miserable. You were just the most visible victim." "I appreciate you telling me. I also wanted to ask if you'd consider resuming sales to Whispering Pines residents once Patricia's gone. I know you have no reason to trust us, but we're not all like her." I leaned on my maul. "You know, someone told me recently that HOA problems happen because most people just want to live their lives and don't pay attention to what the board is doing. Maybe if your community had been more involved from the start, none of this would have happened." Teresa nodded slowly. "You're right. We let Patricia run wild because it was easier than dealing with her. That's on us." "Tell you what," I said, "get her removed and I'll think about it. But I'm not making any promises." "Fair enough." True to her word, Teresa kept me updated over the following weeks. The recall process was apparently a bureaucratic nightmare, requiring multiple meetings and votes. Patricia fought it every step of the way, claiming the recall was retribution for her, doing the hard work of protecting the community. Mitch sent Patricia's HOA a bill for his legal fees, $3,200. According to the judgment, they had 30 days to pay. Mitch warned me they might drag their feet. They paid in 15 days. In early May, I got a call from Teresa. "It's done," she said. "Patricia's out. We held elections last night. I'm the new president. Congratulations." I meant what I said about wanting to make things right. "Would you be willing to meet with me and a few other board members? No lawyers, no formality, just neighbors talking." I thought about it. "Okay, but at my farm. I'm done driving into Whispering Pines." "That works." 3 days later, Teresa showed up with 2 other people, a man named David Chen and a woman named Margaret Foster. They brought coffee and pastries from the bakery in town, which I appreciated. We sat at my kitchen table, and Teresa got right to it. "We want to make this right. Not just smooth things over, but actually fix the relationship between our community and your farm." "I'm listening." "First, a formal written apology from the HOA, acknowledging that the lawsuit was inappropriate and committing to never interfering with your farm operations again. That's a start. Second, we'd like to organize a community event here at your farm in the fall. Let people see what you do, how firewood is processed, the work that goes into it. Build some understanding. A tour, more like a harvest festival kind of thing. Educational, but also fun. Good PR for both of us. I considered it. What's in it for you? Honestly, David Chen spoke up. It makes us look good. Shows we're community-oriented and supportive of local businesses. Plus, a lot of people genuinely want to support you but feel awkward about everything that happened. And you want me to sell to Whispering Pines residents again? We do, Teresa said, but we understand that's your choice. We're not going to pressure you. I looked at the three of them. They seemed sincere, and I appreciated that they weren't trying to pretend the problem had been small or easily fixed. All right, I said. Get me that written apology, and we'll talk about the rest. The apology arrived a week later on official HOA letterhead, signed by all 5 board members. It was straightforward and didn't try to minimize what had happened. The Whispering Pines Homeowners Association formally apologizes to Adrian Calloway for the inappropriate legal action taken against his firewood business. The previous board exceeded its authority and failed to respect Mr. Calloway's property rights and the agricultural character of our area. We commit to maintaining a positive, respectful relationship with Mr. Calloway and all neighboring property owners going forward. I pinned it to my fridge. Planning the fall festival took up more time than I expected, but in a good way. Teresa and her committee were organized and respectful of my time. They didn't try to turn my farm into a theme park. It was educational. Demonstrations of how to split wood properly, information about sustainable forestry, safety talks about chainsaw use and wood burning. The event happened in mid-September, and over 200 people showed up. Families from Whispering Pines mixed with my regular customers and folks from town. I gave tours of my woodlot, showed people my processing area, and answered 1,000 questions about everything from BTU ratings to the best wood species for pizza ovens. Tom Jenkins brought his kids, who were fascinated by my log splitter. Sarah Myers volunteered to help organize the food vendors. Even Robert Patterson showed up and spent an hour helping me demonstrate proper stacking techniques. Patricia Henderson did not attend. The festival was enough of a success that Teresa asked if we could make it an annual thing. I agreed, with the condition that it stayed focused on education and didn't turn into just another neighborhood party. As September turned to October and the weather got colder, my phone started ringing with orders. I had already decided to resume sales to Whispering Pines, but I did it quietly, without any announcement. If someone called and asked, I said yes. Word spread quickly. By November, I was back to having Whispering Pines residents as regular customers. The awkwardness faded faster than I expected. Most people just wanted good firewood at a fair price and were happy to pretend the whole lawsuit thing had never happened. I did keep the judge's written decision framed in my office, though. Just as a reminder, one cold morning in December, almost a year after Patricia's first visit, I was loading my truck for a delivery when I saw a familiar Mercedes pull into my driveway. My first instinct was irritation, but then I saw it wasn't Patricia driving. A man got out, mid-60s, wearing a business suit that looked out of place on a farm. "Adrian Calloway," he asked. "That's me. I'm Richard Henderson, Patricia's husband. Do you have a minute, I guess?" He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot in the cold. I wanted to apologize for everything that happened last winter. My wife got carried away with the HOA thing. It became an obsession. I told her to drop it, but she wouldn't listen. "Okay," She's not president anymore, but I think you know that. The whole thing was humiliating for her. For both of us, really. Mr. Henderson, I appreciate you coming by, but I'm not sure what you want from me. Nothing. I just wanted you to know that not everyone in that house thought what happened was right. Patricia was wrong. She knows it now, even if she'll never admit it. I studied him for a moment. He looked tired. Your wife could have ruined my business, I said quietly. She tried to. Not because I was doing anything wrong, but because she didn't like looking at my property. That's not being carried away. That's being a bully. I know. Does she? Richard Henderson didn't answer. He just nodded once and walked back to his car. I watched him drive away and felt something I hadn't expected. Pity. Patricia had destroyed her own reputation and standing in the community over a pile of wood. She had turned neighbors against her, cost her HOA thousands of dollars, and accomplished nothing except proving that you can't bulldoze people just because you think you have authority. The winter was busy. Word had spread about my victory in court, and I actually picked up new customers from other communities who liked the idea of supporting someone who had stood up to HOA overreach. My income was up 20% over the previous year. In January, on the anniversary of Patricia's first visit, I was stacking wood in the same spot where it had always been stacked when Teresa Bishop drove up. "Morning, Adrian," she called out. "Morning. What brings you out here? Just wanted to say thank you." "For what?" "For giving us a second chance. For not painting everyone in Whispering Pines with the same brush as Patricia. It would have been easy to write us all off. Wouldn't have been fair, though. No, but it would have been understandable." She looked at my wood storage area, neatly organized rows stretching back 50 feet. "You know, I actually think it looks nice, the symmetry of it. There's something satisfying about well-stacked wood," I laughed. "Most people just see a pile of logs. Most people don't pay attention." After she left, I thought about everything that had happened over the past year. The lawsuit, the fight, the victory, the reconciliation. It had been exhausting and expensive and infuriating, but it had also taught me something about standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult. My phone rang. It was a new customer from a development 30 miles south. They had heard about my firewood and wanted to place an order. Business was good. That spring, I expanded my operation, adding another processing area and hiring a part-time helper. The demand was there, and I finally had the confidence to grow. Mitch helped me file the paperwork to officially incorporate as Calloway Farm and Firewood LLC. Teresa kept her promise about the annual festival. The second one was even bigger than the first, with over 300 attendees. We added demonstrations on building projects and coordinated with the County Extension Office to provide information on forest fire prevention. Patricia Henderson moved away in April. I heard through the grapevine that she and Richard had bought a condo in Florida. No one seemed particularly sad to see her go. The Whispering Pines HOA, under Teresa's leadership, became significantly less contentious. They focused on actual community issues like road maintenance and snow removal instead of trying to control what people did with their own properties. It turned out that when an HOA focused on serving residents instead of policing them, people were a lot happier. I never forgot the lesson, though. The framed court decision stayed on my office wall, and I made sure to keep detailed records of everything related to my business. Property rights mattered, and sometimes you had to fight for them. In June, I got a letter from the county. They were revising Ordinance 47B to clarify that it did not apply to agricultural operations. Judge Hendricks had recommended the change after our case, wanting to prevent future confusion. The new language explicitly protected farm businesses from HOA overreach. Mitch called it a significant victory. Not just for me, but for farmers across the county. I called it common sense finally winning. My customer base continued to grow throughout that second year. People appreciated quality firewood delivered on time at fair prices. The fact that I had stood up to an HOA lawsuit became part of my business reputation. One guy who called to place an order said, "I want to buy from someone who doesn't back down from nonsense." I could respect that. The third fall festival was the biggest yet. We had food trucks, a small petting zoo that someone convinced me to allow, and even a local bluegrass band. It had evolved beyond just being about firewood into a genuine community event that brought together people from all the surrounding areas. Tom Jenkins found me during the festival, carrying a cup of apple cider. "You know what's funny?" he said. "What's that?" "Patricia tried to destroy your business because she thought a wood pile was ugly. Instead, she turned you into the most popular business owner in the county." Funny how that works. Think you'll ever forgive her? I thought about it. I don't think about her much anymore, honestly. She's gone. Life moved on. That's probably the best revenge. It's not about revenge, it's just about living well, and I was living well. The farm was profitable. My firewood business was thriving. I had good relationships with my neighbors, including the ones in Whispering Pines. The lawsuit, which had seemed like such a catastrophe when it started, had ultimately led to positive changes. As the sun set on that third festival, I stood by my wood storage area, the same spot that had caused so much trouble 3 years earlier, and watched families enjoying themselves on my property. Kids were running around, adults were talking and laughing, and someone's dog had stolen a hot dog from the food area and was being chased in circles. It was chaotic and messy, and nothing like the sterile, controlled environment Patricia had wanted. It was perfect. Teresa walked over with a plate of barbecue. "You look contemplative. Just thinking about how things change. For the better, I hope." "Yeah, actually, for the better." She handed me the plate. "You earned this. The festival, the business, all of it. You stood your ground when you had every reason to just give up. Wasn't really an option. This is my family's land. I'm not going anywhere. Good. We need more people like you around here." The festival wound down as darkness fell. Families packed up their kids and headed home. Volunteers helped clean up. By 9 o'clock, my farm was quiet again, back to normal. I walked the property line between my farm and Whispering Pines, the same line where Patricia had claimed my wood storage was creating an eyesore. The wood was still there, neatly stacked, ready for the winter season. It would be there next year too, and the year after that, because it was my property, my business, and my right. The lights were on in some of the Whispering Pines houses. I wondered how many of them had firewood from my farm stacked in their garages or on their porches. Probably quite a few. The irony wasn't lost on me. My phone buzzed with a text from Mitch. "Saw the pictures from the festival on social media. Looks like a success. You've come a long way from getting served papers in your driveway," I texted back. "Some days I still can't believe any of it happened." "Believe it, you won. Not just the court case, everything after." He was right, I had won. Not by destroying Patricia or getting revenge, but by simply continuing to do what I had always done. Run an honest business, treat people fairly, and stand up for myself when necessary. The next morning, I woke up early and started processing orders. Winter was coming and people needed firewood. My calendar was booked solid through January. I had hired 2 part-time workers to help with deliveries. The business was expanding faster than I had anticipated. A truck pulled up around noon. I didn't recognize it, which usually meant a new customer. A young couple got out, probably late 20s. "Are you Adrian?" the man asked. "That's me. We just bought a house in Meadowbrook, about 20 miles east of here. Someone told us you're the best firewood supplier in the area. I do my best. What do you need? We talked about their fireplace, their heating needs, and their budget. They ended up ordering 2 cords to be delivered before Thanksgiving. As they were leaving, the woman turned back. "Is it true you got sued by an HOA?" she asked. "Unfortunately, yes. Did you win?" "I did." "Good. HOAs are the worst. Ours just sent us a violation notice because our mailbox is the wrong shade of black." I laughed. Sounds about right. After they left, I thought about how common these stories were. HOAs starting with good intentions but becoming vehicles for petty tyrants to exercise power over their neighbors. Patricia hadn't been unique. She was just one of thousands of people across the country who confused authority with righteousness. The difference was that I had been in a position to fight back. I owned my property outright. I had a legitimate business, and I had resources to hire a lawyer. Not everyone was that lucky. It made me think about the broader issue. How many people were being bullied by their HOAs right now, unable to fight back because they didn't have the time, money, or knowledge to defend themselves? I called Mitch. "What would it take to help other people in situations like mine?" I asked. "What do you mean? People getting pushed around by their HOAs? What if we created some kind of resource or legal fund?" Mitch was quiet for a moment. "That's ambitious, also expensive. I have money now. The business is doing well. Let me think about it. There might be a way to structure something through the County Bar Association. Pro bono hours, educational workshops, that kind of thing. Let me know what you come up with." 2 months later, Mitch called me back with a proposal. We could set up a legal aid clinic focused on property rights issues, including HOA disputes. It would be funded partly by my donation and partly by grants from organizations that supported property rights. Lawyers would volunteer their time, and we would provide free consultations to people who couldn't afford representation. I donated $10,000 to get it started. The clinic opened the following spring in a small office in town. Mitch recruited 3 other lawyers to help staff it. Word spread quickly, and soon they were seeing multiple clients every week. Most cases got resolved through simple legal letters. A few went to court. They named it the Calloway Property Rights Initiative, which embarrassed me but also made me proud. One afternoon, I was delivering wood to a customer when I saw a familiar silver Mercedes parked at a house down the street. My stomach tightened reflexively before I remembered that Patricia had moved to Florida. It was just a car. Still, the memory of that first morning lingered. The shock of being confronted with legal papers on my own property. The anger and confusion. The determination not to back down. I had made the right choice. Standing up to Patricia had been hard, but giving in would have been worse. It would have set a precedent that anyone with an HOA title could push around their neighbors. The customer I was delivering to mention that they were thinking about buying land outside of any HOA jurisdiction. "After hearing about what happened to you, we decided we didn't want to deal with that kind of drama," she said. "Can't say I blame you. Do you think HOAs serve any purpose?" "Sure, in some contexts. Shared amenities, maintenance of common areas. But too often they become about control instead of community. That's what we're afraid of." More and more, I heard stories like that. People specifically avoiding HOAs because they had heard what happened to me or to someone else. The pendulum was swinging, at least in rural Montana. People wanted property rights and freedom more than they wanted uniformity and rules. Summer came again, bringing long days and warm weather. My firewood business slowed during the off-season, which gave me time to focus on other farm projects. I expanded my vegetable garden, repaired the barn, and finally fixed the irrigation system that had been on my to-do list for 2 years. Teresa stopped by one afternoon with news. "We're changing the HOA bylaws," she said. "Oh yeah," making it harder for any one person to have too much power. Term limits, required approval from residents for legal action, transparency requirements. Basically, making sure what happened with Patricia can never happen again. That's good. It should have been done from the start. We're also reaching out to neighboring property owners, including you, to establish better communication. No more surprises. I appreciate that. You changed our community, Adrian, for the better." After she left, I sat on my porch and watched the sunset. The wood pile was still there, right where it had always been. It would be there long after I was gone, assuming my children or grandchildren kept up the business. That night, I got an email from someone I didn't know, a man named Stephen Parker in Colorado. He had heard about my case and wanted advice. His HOA was trying to fine him for parking his work truck in his own driveway. I forwarded the email to Mitch and the Property Rights Clinic. This was bigger than just me and my firewood. It was about standing up for people's rights to use their own property as they saw fit, within reason. It was about pushing back against the creeping authoritarianism of HOAs that had forgotten they were supposed to serve their members, not rule them. Fall came around again, bringing the 4th annual festival. It had become a genuine tradition, something people marked on their calendars. Local businesses sponsored it. The county extension office made it an official outreach event. A reporter from the Missoula newspaper came and wrote a feature story about the farm and the festival's origins. The story mentioned Patricia and the lawsuit, but only briefly. The focus was on community building and supporting local agriculture. Patricia had become a footnote in a larger, more positive story. I could live with that. During the festival, a woman approached me. She was older, maybe 70s, with kind eyes. "You don't know me," she said, "but I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "My son lives in Wyoming. His HOA was trying to fine him for having a garden in his front yard. He heard about your case, stood up to them, and won. Your story gave him courage." I felt a lump in my throat. "I'm glad I could help." "You did more than help. You reminded people that they don't have to accept being pushed around." That conversation stayed with me for days. I had fought my battle because I had to, because giving up wasn't in my nature. I hadn't thought about the broader impact, about how my actions might inspire others. It was humbling and motivating at the same time. Winter settled in again, my 4th since Patricia's visit. The firewood business was busier than ever. I had 3 employees now and a waiting list of customers. The farm was profitable enough that I was thinking about buying additional land. On a cold January morning, 4 years to the day after Patricia had first knocked on my door, I stood in the same spot where I had stood that morning, looking out at my property. The wood pile had grown larger. The business had grown stronger. The community had grown closer. Everything Patricia had tried to destroy had flourished instead. My phone rang. It was a customer from Whispering Pines placing an order. 2 cords, same as last year, he said. "You got it. I'll have it delivered by Thursday." "Appreciate it, Adrian. And hey, happy anniversary." Anniversary. It's been 4 years since you told the HOA to pound sand. Some of us consider it a local holiday. I laughed. I'm not sure it deserves holiday status. Sure it does. Standing up to tyranny always deserves celebration. After we hung up, I looked at my wood storage area one more time. Patricia had called it an eyesore. Judge Hendricks had called it agriculture. I called it my livelihood. But really, it was more than that. It was a symbol of the right to live and work on your own land without interference from people who thought they knew better. It was a reminder that bullies, even ones with official titles and legal papers, could be defeated if you stood your ground. and it was proof that sometimes the best revenge was simply continuing to exist and thrive despite someone's best efforts to stop you. I went back to work, splitting wood in the cold morning air, smoke rising from my chimney, my farm alive and productive. Patricia was gone. The HOA had reformed. The community was stronger. My business was thriving. I had won in every way that mattered, and the wood pile remained exactly where it had always been, exactly where it would always be. Because some things are worth fighting for, and some stands are worth taking, and some principles matter more than peace. I learned that the hard way, and I wouldn't trade the lesson for anything.